হিন্দুদের নিয়ে, হিন্দুদের জন্য, হিন্দু লাইফস ম্যাটার নিয়মিত ভিডিও পেতে চ্যানেলটি সাবস্ক্রাইব করুন এবং পাশের বেল আইকনটি প্রেস করুন।
Namaskar, welcome to Hindu Lives Matter YouTube channel. The persecution of minorities in Bangladesh, especially Hindus, is sobering and very saddening fact. You won't find a single Hindu person, man, woman or a child that does not know about or has not experienced the persecution due to their religion. All across Bangladesh, and it has been for years, the Hindus are being tortured. Hindu women and girls are raped, kidnapped. Our lands are grabbed forcibly, and our people are forced to leave the country. More than 2.6 million acres of our prime land has been taken away through a government scheme called Enemy Property Act and Vested Property Act. There is no justice for Hindus. Before the partition of the subcontinent in 1947, the population of Hindus in Bangladesh were about 35%. So we were like 1/3 of the population in their country. In 1971, during the War of Independence, our population was 23% in Bangladesh. Today, the Hindu population in Bangladesh is a meager 8% or 9% or 10%, whatever that is. Since 1971, Muslim population in Bangladesh grew 2.5 times. During the same time, Hindu population decreased. How? If we had 20 million people in 1970, 1980s, why do we have 15 million people now? Where are these people? Where is the growth rate? We are seeing the carnage against the Hindus throughout the country, especially now during this year's 2021 Durga Puja. You see the demolition of temples, demolition of puja mandaps, burning of Hindu houses and businesses, torturing of Hindu men, women and children, rape, even a 10-year-old girl in front of her mother. It's so sad. Our devotees, the ISKCON devotee and Noakhali, 2 devotees were killed. They were brutally chopped to death. This is the sobering fact of Bangladesh, and we never get justice. Nobody listened to us. Nobody take care of us. All the torture that occurred throughout several decades, not a single perpetrator has been brought to justice. This is an unmitigated disaster. That's why the Islamists are daring to perpetrate this kind of heinous crimes with impunity because of the government inaction, because there is no justice. Former US Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and one-time Democratic presidential contestant so eloquently spoke about this. Watch this video.
It broke my heart to see such hate and violence being directed towards devotees of God in their temples in Bangladesh. For these jihadists to believe that it is pleasing to God to burn and destroy temples and the murti of such a saintly person as His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, this just shows how far away from God they really are. God is love, and His true servants embody and manifest that love in the world. Now's the time for the supposedly secular government of Bangladesh to protect that country's religious minorities, including Hindus, Christians, and Buddhists, from the jihadist forces of hate.
We are very proud of Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and her support. She's so passionate about these issues. She's mortified, you can see in her voice. She also speaks very often about this violation of human rights, about the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh, in fact, persecution of all people throughout the world. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard also broadcasted a video before about the same issue. You can see this.
As a member of Congress, I introduced a resolution that called for the protection of Hindus and religious minorities in Bangladesh, people who continue to be targeted and persecuted to this day. Now, the height of this persecution actually began 50 years ago when the Pakistani army systematically murdered, raped, and drove from their homes millions of Bengali Hindus because of their religion and ethnicity. On March 25th, 1971, was the beginning of a systematic targeting of Hindus in Bangladesh by the Pakistani military. It began in Hindu neighborhoods and villages, first at Jagannath Hall, which was a Hindu dormitory in Dhaka University, where 5,000 to 10,000 people were killed on that first night alone. This genocidal campaign continued for 10 months, resulting in 2 to 3 million people killed, hundreds of thousands of women and girls raped, and more than 10 million forced to flee their homes. U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy went to visit the Bangladeshi refugees at that time and said, quote, "Nothing is more clear or more easily documented than the systematic campaign of terror and its genocidal consequences launched by the Pakistan Army on the night of March 25th. Hardest hit have been members of the Hindu community who have been robbed of their lands and shops, systematically slaughtered, and in some places painted with yellow patches marked H." End of quote. Now, the Islamist, not to be confused with Islam, the Islamist persecution of Hindus and other religious minorities in Bangladesh didn't end with Bangladesh's independence. That campaign continues to this day with horrific targeted attacks, murders, homes being burned down, and families who continue to be forced to flee. In the early 1900s, Hindus made up roughly 33% of the Bangladesh population. Because of this persistent Islamist campaign targeting Hindus, just 8% of Bangladesh's population are Hindus today. Just a few days ago, in Bangladesh, hundreds of hardline Islamist extremists attacked Hindu temples, destroyed a train, set fire to government buildings, the press club, and public buses, leaving dead and injured behind. Unfortunately, the Islamists' campaign of terror against Hindus, other religious minorities, secularists, atheists, and others in Bangladesh is not unique. It's been going on for centuries. And prior to U.S. regime change wars in Iraq, Libya, and Syria, which either toppled or weakened secular authoritarian leaders who protected religious minorities from Islamist jihadists, there were 1.5 million Christians in Iraq and 2.2 million in Syria. Now there are an estimated 200,000 to 300,000 Christians in Iraq and 450,000 in Syria. Afghanistan was a very multi-religious country which included Hindus, Buddhists, Zoroastrians, and more prior to the Islamist takeover. Today, it is estimated there are around 1,000 Hindus who remain. Religious minorities make up less than 1% of Afghanistan's population. Until the leaders of the United States and the world condemn and commit to defeating the Islamist exclusivist ideology, an ideology which holds that all non-Muslims and many so-called quote-unquote heretical Muslims need to be wiped from the face of the earth,
enslaved, or at the very least kept as second-class citizens without the right to own land, worship openly, etc., like in Pakistan, the jihadist campaign of terror will continue throughout the world.
We are very grateful for your support, and please continue to stand with us, stand beside us, and continue to support the Hindus of Bangladesh and continue your quest for justice for the Hindus in Bangladesh. Namaskar. Thank you.